Watch right now on the Front News Project. World War III is knocking at the door. Russian Iskanders right next to Warsaw. NATO troops are entering Poland. Once again, through the pipeline, Russian mobilized troops are ready to storm the Kupiansk direction, and the guests are being met. And also, the Russian Black Sea Fleet in occupied Crimea has been reduced to ashes. Exclusive footage. Fiery, hot, and blazing scenes from the front line. Watch right now. Greetings, this is Vladimir Tymoshenko with you, and we're starting right away with the main topic. The world is on the brink of World War III. Poland has closed its border with Belarus, and the Kremlin, of course, is furious. Meanwhile, the Zapad 2025 exercises have begun in Belarus. NATO has legitimate concerns that, under the guise of these exercises, Russia might attack the Suwałki corridor, which connects Poland and Lithuania. Here are the details.
Poland's closed border with Belarus is not a defense against mythical threats. It's a symptom of a serious illness, an illness called hysterical militarism.
On September 12th, Poland completely halted movement through all border crossings with Belarus. The restrictions apply in both directions.
I think this is just some kind of, well, how should I put it, provocation on their part. They provoke, they close the border, and they also engage in petty mischief. They're simply provoking retaliatory actions.
Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zakharova criticized Poland's decision to close all border checkpoints.
It is obvious that the confrontational steps taken by the Polish leadership serve a single purpose: to justify the policy of further escalating tensions in the center of Europe. We urge Warsaw to consider the consequences of such destructive actions and to reconsider the decision as soon as possible.
Warsaw's decision was a direct response to the start of the joint Belarus-Russia military exercises, Zapad 2025.
We are conducting these exercises on our own initiative and independently, without regard to the countries to our west. This is about raising the level of training of our servicemen and improving the coordination between the armed forces of Belarus and Russia. We are doing this for ourselves, to show that we are ready to defend ourselves and pose no threat to anyone. At the
exercises, it is planned to practice the planning of the use of nuclear weapons and the Oreshnik missile system. The exercises on the territory of the Republic of Belarus are being conducted at training grounds located deep within the country or in its eastern regions. Despite this, NATO remains on heightened alert because of these exercises.
Since 2020, the decision was made to create a regional grouping. We are strictly adhering to the decisions of our heads of state. We conduct these exercises every 2 years.
The exercises will continue until September 16th. At the same time, NATO, Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia are conducting counter-maneuvers. And all of this is happening close to each other with live fire and heavy equipment.
We must clearly demonstrate the strength of the alliance, the strength of the Polish army, our relationships, skills, and capabilities.
Earlier, it became known that, amid Russian drone attacks, Poland is moving about 40,000 soldiers to its borders with Belarus and the Russian Federation.
1 or 2 drones could have been considered a mistake. But the launch of the 19th drone from territory controlled by Russia was a deliberate attack on Poland and the eastern flank of NATO.
These exercises are considered among the largest and most important this year. They involve 600 pieces of equipment from all branches of the Polish Armed Forces and NATO countries.
Poland was preparing for the Zapad 2025 exercises. For many months, Polish troops conducted exercises involving more than 30,000 Polish and NATO soldiers in order to respond adequately.
Not everyone understands that if you don't give a tough response to a Russian provocation, it will happen again.
Usually we can reduce the likelihood of a sudden attack if we see unusual troop movements and deployments. But when all this is disguised as an exercise, it becomes much harder to detect.
NATO has been strengthening its defenses in this region since 2014. In 2020, the presidents of the United States and Poland, Donald Trump and Andrzej Duda, signed an agreement under which American troops in Poland were moved from a rotational basis to permanent deployment. Under the agreement, the number of U.S. troops was increased to 5,500 service members, and a decision was made to establish 6 military bases. In addition, the Pentagon re-established the 5th Army Corps of the U.S. Armed Forces. Minsk is not pleased with the neighbors' military exercises. Valery Revenko, Assistant Minister of Defense of the Republic of Belarus, stated that the actions of neighboring countries have begun to take on an increasingly aggressive character.
What is most concerning is the decision by the Polish military leadership to form a group of more than 30,000 troops. This is already a serious force in our assessment.
They also don't like Lithuania, which is deploying additional air defense systems near the Belarusian border and increasing the intensity of exercises at the Pabraid training ground.
We are not hiding anything from anyone. We are truly demonstrating openness, showing that these exercises of ours are purely defensive in nature. And we have no intention of attacking anyone, as some people seem to think. But that's their business. Let them think what they want.
The Suwałki corridor is the only land route for NATO forces to Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Military analysts often describe it as the most vulnerable spot and the most dangerous zone for NATO. As the events of 2022 show, after such exercises involving the Kremlin, the main threat does not come from neighboring countries, but from the territory of Belarus. After all, it was Russian troops that took part in the attack on Ukraine. The West remembers this well, and it irritates the Belarusian military.
Listen to how these talkers are stirring up tension out of thin air. They probably want us to respond to this in an appropriate way. But I have already warned 1,000 times that we do not want any wars or conflicts. You accused Russia and Belarus of planning to invade yesterday, to invade Ukraine. We didn't invade despite your intelligence and the billions of dollars you spend. Useless.
In recent months, Lukashenko has often met with foreign representatives, constantly demonstrating his loyalty. But it should not be forgotten that it is beneficial for Russia to keep Belarus independent as a kind of forward base in the West, through which it can demonstrate strength if necessary.
And now, let's analyze the situation on the blazing Pokrovsk front, Krovova and Vakanalia. The enemy's army continues here as well. On the Pokrovsk front, since the beginning of the day, the occupiers have launched 25 attacks on the positions of our defenders in the areas of the settlements of Vladimirovka, Zapovednaya, Novoekonomikeskaya, Kotlina, Udachnaya, Dachnaya, and towards Volny, Krasny Liman, Mirnograd, Rodinskoye, Promen, Zaverev, Molodetsky, Novopodgorodny, Novopavlovka, Ternovoy, Novoevanovka. The enemy's onslaught is also being held back, and at the same time, Ukrainian defenders have already repelled 24 attacks. Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine have emptied the occupiers' military bases. The fact is that at one of the strategic facilities of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Crimea, a shortage of military equipment and provisions has been recorded. In addition, the defense forces struck the Russians' railway infrastructure, paralyzing the movement of about 15 trains. We have prepared all the details especially for you. They are left with almost no equipment. The attacks by the armed forces of Ukraine have effectively destroyed the Russian military base in Sevastopol. Agents of the partisan movement Tesh, during reconnaissance of the 758th Logistics Support Center of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, discovered that there was almost no equipment left on the base, and the few remaining vehicles appeared to be non-operational.
We're talking about the fact that from the Kherson direction, the Russian occupiers have redeployed units of the 7th Airborne Division to the Zaporizhzhia direction. Therefore, I do not rule out the possibility that the lack of equipment at this facility is due to the so-called rotation or redeployment of personnel and, accordingly, equipment directly to the area where active combat operations are taking place.
Additionally, the Ukrainian Armed Forces carried out explosions on Russian railways. One of the operations took place on the Malahangelsk-Glazunovka section. There, Russian Railways employees discovered unidentified mines. During the demining process, an explosion occurred, resulting in the deaths of 2 National Guard officers. Another was wounded. Federal-level railway traffic was also halted.
These are all of the individuals who have an essential need to travel to the cities of Belgorod, Ursk, and Ukonare.
Another explosion occurred in the Leningrad region on the St. Petersburg-Pskov railway on the Strogonovo-Mshinskaya section. As a result of the sabotage, a locomotive derailed and 15 fuel tank cars were destroyed. But it's not only in the rear where the enemy is uneasy. Zelensky reports occupiers are failing Kremlin's plans as Ukraine succeeds in the Sumy and Kharkiv regions, inflicting heavy Russian losses.
In the Sumy direction, Ukraine's defense forces have seized the operational initiative. This refers to advances directly toward the notional Russian-Ukrainian borderline. In the Sumy direction, Ukraine's defense forces have thwarted not only the military but also the political plans of the Russian leadership to create a so-called buffer zone with an advance depth of up to 20 kilometers.
Meanwhile, Russian troops continue to violate NATO airspace. The Russian drone detected in Romanian airspace on the night of September 13th became the second such incident after Poland. As noted by the Institute for the Study of War, Russia is thus trying to analyze the capabilities and response of the North Atlantic Alliance to the incursion of strike drones in order to use these observations in future conflicts.
The Russian Federation is testing NATO's possible response not only at the moment of airspace violation, but also in terms of the issuance of emergency signals over a significant area of NATO countries. First and foremost, this concerns the Baltic countries, Poland, and accordingly the Scandinavian countries. In addition, free navigation in the Baltic Sea is under threat.
Meanwhile, the Polish foreign minister has proposed that the West intercept Russian drones and missiles in Ukrainian airspace.
This is a revision of the position for the better. Let me remind you, the Ukrainian side has been making proposals to close the airspace over Western Ukraine since the beginning of the large-scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. Accordingly, the large-scale provocation by the Russian Federation became a catalyst for the Polish political leadership to change its position regarding the neutralization of the occupier country's aerodynamic weapons.
As reported by the New York Times, the production of strike and reconnaissance drones has become a priority for the Russian dictator. Just in 2025, the occupiers have launched more than 30,000 UAVs, which is almost 9 times more than during the same period last year. Accordingly, the aggressor country has also increased its production of drones.
The comparison is given in numbers, respectively, for the past year and the launches of drones specifically in 2025. Moreover, it is not emphasized that up to 50% of these drones are decoy drones, so-called Urbers, which do not carry a warhead. Therefore, at the moment, there is no basis to talk about the scaling up of strike drone production specifically. And
now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Kupiansk front, where the enemy is becoming more aggressive as well. Since the beginning of the day, the enemy has attacked 6 times on the Kupiansk direction in the areas of the settlements of Kontroshovka, Zagryzovo, and towards Kupiansk. Another clash is still ongoing. And now, attention, Russian troops are trying to reach Kupiansk through underground pipes. The entrances to the pipe are located in the area of Lyman 1. For movement, Russian soldiers use specially designed wheeled cots and electric scooters where the height allows. According to analysts, it takes about 4 days to reach the outskirts of Kupiansk. Along the route, special rest areas and food supplies have been set up. But the Ukrainian Armed Forces are already prepared to meet uninvited guests in the pipes. How exactly? We'll show you now.
The occupiers are trying to break through the Ukrainian defenses. The Russians are advancing simultaneously on 5 sections of the front. Thus, in the Veliko-Mikhailivka direction in the Zaporizhzhia region, the enemy is actively preparing for the offensive phase. The main goal of the occupiers is to reach the village of Verbov.
We always knew
that there would be assault actions, but we didn't expect the enemy to advance on such a broad front.
The situation is a bit better in the Novopavlivka direction. Here, our defenders managed to take control of the settlement of Filial. Previously, it was repeatedly attacked by the enemy, who is trying to seize it. But now the positions are held by the Ukrainian Armed Forces. The military explains that this tactical strongpoint is extremely important for the armed forces of Ukraine, because it allows them to monitor the movement of enemy infantry and equipment. The situation in the Pokrovsk direction is difficult but stable. The main fighting there is concentrated in the area of Vladimirovka. The Ukrainian armed forces control most of the settlement. But the enemy does not stop, strikes with KABs, tries to change the tactical situation, and may attempt to break through our lines. At the same time, Ukrainian units are conducting counterattacks to the southeast of Sofiivka to regain control over the local tree lines.
The enemy
is not stupid at all. After each assault, they conduct a debriefing. They take what works and use it the next time. And what doesn't work, they don't use again. That's why, in this case, there was very active cooperation among the FPV drone operators. There was also active cooperation with reconnaissance UAVs like the Zala. Then the Lancets were launched. The enemy reacts very actively.
In the Konstantinovka direction, the Russian army is trying to gain a foothold in the dacha areas in front of the city, building up forces and equipment for a breakthrough. Nevertheless, our fighters are systematically targeting the occupiers. That's why the location is currently in a so-called gray zone. The key vector for the Russians right now is the southeastern flank. It is from there that the main strike on the city may begin, and the further course of the fighting depends on our ability to timely detect and eliminate concentrations of enemy forces.
The artillery performed very well. A lot of their equipment was hit. A light vehicle was blown up by mines, since as a normal regular brigade we are very good at fortifying the front line from an engineering standpoint.
The fighting does not subside in the Siversk-Lyman direction. Dronivka, Siversk itself, and nearby villages on the approaches to the city have come under attack. Active combat operations are also continuing in Zarekny. Neither we nor the enemy have stable control over the territory there. At the same time, special forces from the main intelligence directorate struck an enemy surface-to-air missile system. GUR fighters detected and successfully delivered fire damage to a Buk-Mike 3 system belonging to the Russian invaders. The cost of this SAM system ranges from $40 to $50 million. Today, the Kremlin also lost another expensive Putin military toy. This is the Arion Strike Reconnaissance UAV. Its operational range is about 300 kilometers, and the approximate cost of the downed metal bird is over $5 million. The day before, Ukrainian drones flew into another Russian oil refinery. The UAVs attacked a number of Russia's oil refining facilities and enemy military-industrial complex sites. A major methanol production facility in the Russian city of Gubaka was hit, in the Perm region. The strike on the occupiers' key chemical infrastructure, located more than 1,600 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, was a real shock for the Kremlin. The Kurishi oil refinery in the Leningrad region was also hit. According to Russian reports, 3 drones in the area of the city of Kurishi were shot down, but their debris caused a fire on the premises of the facility. However, eyewitness videos suggest otherwise. Footage from the refinery looks more like a direct drone strike than shrapnel damage to the oil processing plant. Incidentally, the Kurishi refinery is considered one of the largest in Russia. And before the arrival of Ukrainian drones, it was capable of processing about 20 million tons of oil per year. Unfortunately, it was also loud the night before in the Kyiv region, where explosions occurred on the railway in the middle of the night. Powerful flashes and repeated sounds of explosions thundered in the area of the village of Kalinivka. As it turned out, munitions detonated there during transportation by rail. A series of explosions damaged the overhead contact system, resulting in dozens of shipments being delayed. And now trains are running on a detour around the damaged section. By a random coincidence, a passenger train was also at the epicenter of the explosions. The Kharkiv-Przemysl train made an emergency stop, and hundreds of passengers were urgently evacuated from the scene to the nearest forest belt. Fortunately, no one was seriously injured, and after a few hours, the train continued on its route.
And now, let's discuss the situation on the Toretsk front in detail. The Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. On the Toretsk front, Russian occupiers launched 7 assaults on our defenders' positions in the areas of Shcherbinivka, Katarinivka, and towards Pleshchevka, Rusin Yar, and Poltavka. Ukrainian units repelled 2 attacks, while 5 more clashes are still ongoing.
Thus, over the past year, Russia has increased its production of strike UAVs 9-fold. This was reported by the New York Times. According to the publication, in 2025, Russia launched more than 34,000 strike drones and decoy drones at Ukraine, which is almost 9 times higher than the figure for the same period last year. All the details and the enemy's further plans are known to our journalists.
In 2025, Russia sent more than 34,000 strike drones and decoys to Ukraine. This number is almost 9 times higher than the figure for the same period last year, according to the New York Times.
Russia's war against Ukraine is perhaps the first war in world history where drones play such a critical role. So I think that's a fact.
On a single night during the first weekend of September, Russia launched a record number against our country, 810 strike drones and decoys. According to the analysis provided by journalists, this number only keeps increasing every month.
Esteemed security analysts are now increasingly stating that the daunting prospect of facing coordinated attacks by 1,000 drones within a single night is becoming a much more commonplace reality. To put this into perspective, it's really just basic math. If you consider that there are 30 days in an average month, then 1,000 drones per night ultimately means you're facing 30,000 drones over that time. Drones per month that Russia would need to produce. So, as we can see, there hasn't been a night with 1,000 yet, but there have already been nights with 700 drones. So, in principle, the Russian Federation definitely has the necessary capability. And in this context, it is very important to understand exactly what components these unmanned aerial vehicles are made of, in order to, let's say, have well-founded leverage over the countries that supply them.
Putin's autocratic government has made it clear that drones are a top priority for the country, which has mobilized both state and private resources to create a drone production empire. Thus, by 2026, even school children will be involved in production.
Still, I am inclined to believe that the Russian Federation does not possess a fully self-sufficient and closed internal production cycle, which essentially means that it is unable to manufacture every single one of the required drone components entirely by itself. Therefore, it becomes imperative that we actively search for the pathways in which these particular components ultimately find their way into Russia.
According to analyst estimates, Russia is currently capable of producing about 30,000 strike drones modeled after the Iranian ones per year. It is believed that by 2026, the terrorist state will be able to double this figure.
But whether this will actually happen is something that the economy will show us next year, since we must not forget that. Economic problems are among the factors that could either halt or at least significantly reduce drone production in Russia.
Experts note that Moscow sends strike drones in swarms or waves and directs them along convoluted trajectories to distract attention from the real targets. An increasing number of decoys made from painted foam and plywood are also being sent, which sometimes contain small warheads and are indistinguishable from real drones in the sky.
We are seeing an exponential increase in the number of drones that Russia is using. These are indeed different types, so it's not just mock-ups. These are actually decoy drones. Why are they made? So that Ukraine spends its counter-drone systems. In the case of the West, as we can see, these are extremely expensive missiles that may cost millions, and they are used to shoot down these decoy drones, which might only cost a couple of $1,000s. Yes, it is believed that decoys are necessary so that Ukraine depletes its air defense systems. And as not only Ukraine, but also Ukraine's Western partners in the European Union have recently realized, I am nevertheless cautiously inclined to think that things are no longer so perfect in Russia when it comes to the production of combat drones. Accordingly, there is an increase in simpler production and decoys, and their numbers are growing. Because naturally, if Russia had the capability to produce a huge number of combat drones, then what would be the point of making decoys when you could just make purely combat drones that would cause real damage?
Now, Russian drones avoid open areas where Ukrainian air defense units operate, flying instead over rivers and forests. When drones enter cities, they are harder to shoot down because of tall buildings and the risk to civilians.
Well then, let's now move to the Novopavlivka direction of the front. Putin's army is up to its usual tricks here as well. On the Novopavlivka front, the invaders launched 16 assaults on Ukrainian positions near the settlements of Yalta, Kamyshevaka, Voronoya, and in the direction of Filia, Iskra, Yanvarske, and Olhovske. At this very moment, it's important to report that two separate clashes are still actively ongoing. Meanwhile, TSN's own correspondent, Andriy Tsaplienko, has been working to explore the genuinely revolutionary technologies which are making it possible for our brave defenders, even while facing a considerable shortage of personnel, to successfully maintain control over a key part of the Donbass region. To be more specific, this refers to the particular territory that is currently under the direct control of the armed forces of our nation. How ground robots manage to strike the enemy with pinpoint accuracy. That is exactly what the next segment is about.
Until recently, you could easily drive along this road to Sloviansk. Now it's better to turn off it. And if you do drive on it, pedal to the metal. FPV drones now reach here. This is worn not only by new road signs, but also by the skeletons of burned out cars. The enemy systematically targets logistics with drones, striking more accurately and deeper each time. That's why ground robots have taken on the job of delivering everything needed to the front line. In such missions, the coordination of the team and the crew plays a key role. And this is quite literally a matter of survival, because every extra second at the position increases the risk of a drone strike. Together with the crew of the 93rd Brigade, we head to the loading point. A soldier armed with a carbine shotgun keeps a close watch not only on the sky, but also on the ground. There are quite a few so-called waiting drones near Kostiantynivka. They lie in wait and sleep mode near the road, waiting for high-value targets. And for the Russians, we are a very high-value target. A pickup truck with a ground robot, so the gunner has to spot it and take it out immediately and preferably before it catches up to our pickup. Right now, the ground robot is being unloaded, and this is the riskiest part of the operation because everything has to be done quickly before the enemy's aerial scout spots this machine. In some cases, you just can't do without human hands. In just a few minutes, the fighters load heavy logs onto the iron back of the unmanned assistant, and it quickly takes off toward the front line.
Check in.
The guys there will have something to reinforce the dugout with if the robot makes it. The next mission is just as important and just as risky. In the tunnel under the netting, you feel protected from drones, but you have to dash out from under the net into open space. That's why we stopped to check the sky.
How's the sky looking? Clear. Clear, all right, let's go.
Kostiantynivka is a strategically important stronghold for the Ukrainian army. Dozens of aerial bombs fall on the city every day, and Russian drones fly over the maze of streets hunting for the defenders of Kostiantynivka. But their main target is logistics. The starting point was chosen to be Kostiantynivka itself. From here, a tracked drone will deliver water to a separate observation post. The cargo is already on the platform to minimize the time we're exposed to the enemy. Everything is quick. Now this drone will take the water to the positions. Whether it makes it there or not will determine if our guys can hold their positions. The company of ground robotic systems, Alter Ego, carries out such missions every day. Gradually, all logistics and evacuation in the brigade are being shifted to robots.
Logistics is something that will be felt equally by all units. People will no longer have to carry mines and mortars themselves. People will receive enough food and water. Please reveal this card. What card is this?
It's the Queen of Spades. Okay, the chief engineer of the ground robotics unit of the Kolodny Yar Brigade was a professional magician before the war. And now he continues to amaze by having his platforms accomplish tasks with an asterisk, missions that just yesterday were considered impossible.
I can transport 200 kilograms, 300, even half a ton at a time.
But that's not always the case. If the enemy spots Ukrainian platforms, they unleash an entire arsenal on them, from mines and shells to FPVs and Lancets. They hit especially hard and mercilessly at the vehicles evacuating the wounded. But with robots, you don't have to risk other lives to save one. And the chances for the wounded increase because robots mean gain time. Without them, sometimes there is no chance of evacuation at all.
If you take a look, for example, at this very combat vehicle of ours, it's been hit multiple times already. It has damage, shrapnel marks, and traces of FPV strikes. It's a miracle, I'm telling you. It's a legend because it survived about 11 or 12 FPV strikes.
If those had been people, gunners, infantrymen, that would have been 11 soldiers?
Yeah, that would have been minus 11 soldiers.
In the area of Konstantinovka, robots armed with machine guns are starting to carry out assault missions as well. Just a year ago, such missions were considered unrealistic.
I didn't believe it either, but I've already carried out 3 or 4 such operations myself. Now everyone is arming them with machine guns, turrets, Brownings, because they've already seen and understood that it's effective.
Right now, engineers from the 93rd Brigade are preparing a wheeled robot with a machine gun for deployment. The test firing continues. The operators are satisfied with the shooting accuracy. Now all that's left is to wait for nightfall and move the drone as close as possible to the enemy's dugouts.
Can't you hear the microphone? Are they shooting at you over there?
The Russians apparently didn't expect anyone to get so close to them. At first, they didn't even return fire at the Ukrainian machine gun. But then it seems they came to their senses. But the one pulling the trigger is actually out of reach. He is kilometers away from the occupier's position.
At the moment, this is mostly suppressive fire. So yes, we do have confirmation of enemy casualties, but there are shortcomings in reaction speed. In other words, you can't just move it by hand here, there's an electronic component involved.
So the revolution of ground drones hasn't happened yet, but it's already clear what could suddenly bring it closer. Can such systems work with artificial intelligence so that the system itself identifies the target?
I'm a bit afraid of that because for now we can't come up with a safety mechanism that will definitely work if a friendly enters the system's field of view.
However, if Ukrainians are the first to teach such systems to select targets on their own, it will once again change the nature of the war and help them hold out in conditions where there is a critical shortage of infantry in the trenches.
That's all for today, but very soon on Front News, you'll see new unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, brought to you so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.